friends. My name is Bill Ropke, and I'd like to welcome you to the second session in our series of understanding fundamentalist Islam from a fundamentalist Christian perspective. Last week's session, which is available on YouTube as well as on the website halcyonipublishing.com, last session talked about why this topic and why now. And this week what I'd like to be able to do is I'd like to continue on with our discussion, and we can be able to look at some of the commonalities between the three great faiths, and then a little bit later on we're going to move into looking at some of the disparities, at least as far as the very beginnings of Islam. So with having said that, let's go ahead and get started. Excuse me, just before we get started, please understand that the outline for today's session is also available, or will be available, on the website halcyonipublishing.com. So if you'd like to download it, there's a tremendous amount of information that we're going to talk about today. And as a matter of fact, I believe that this session is going to actually run into, we're going to have to stop it, and then we'll pick back up again with the next recording. So if you want to get a download, please come to the website and download the outline. Alright, so let's get back to our topic. We're going to talk about today what are the commonalities between the three great faiths. When you look at Islam, Muslims believe that Jews, Christians, and themselves are the children of the book. Now, when you look at their definition of the book, they describe that as the compilations of the three testaments. What I mean by that is and we talked a little bit about this last week, the Muslims believe that all three of the great faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, all had a portion of the truth. However, they believe that the Jews as well as the Christians have distorted the truth. While they may have a part of the truth, they do not have the complete truth, and they look at the final testament, or the Quran, as being the culmination and or the combination of the truths from the two prior religious traditions, that is Judaism and Christianity. The reason why Muslims consider the Jews, Christians, and themselves to be the three great faiths is that these are the three monotheistic religions in the world. There are no other monotheistic religions, and that is the reason why Islam considers these three to be great faiths. When you look at the Jews, and again we talked about this just a minute, but I want to just a few minutes ago, but I want to hit this again. The Jews in the Old Testament, the Muslims believe had the truth, particularly in the first 5 books of the Bible, or the Old Testament, which are called the Pentateuch. So the Muslims believe that they received the original revelation of God, but then a little bit later on it was corrupted. Anytime that you look at a study of Islam, biblical genealogies, or the genealogies of the faith, become tremendously important. When you look at Christians and Jews up until the time of Christ, we basically hold to the same lineage of Christ, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. To indicate that, particularly when you look in the New Testament of Jesus being the offspring or the seed of David, a little bit later on we're going to be talking about how that quite a few of the Muslim scholars believe that Muhammad is a direct descendant of Ishmael. So when you look at genealogies, that is a lot of where the authenticity of their beliefs actually derive from. Later on, when we start talking about the study of hadiths, or the sayings and actions of Muhammad, one of the things that's going to be really important as far as identifying the authenticity of the hadith is who was the person who heard or saw the behavior of Muhammad, and how was it passed on. So even whenever you look at the study of the hadiths, in a sense it's almost a genealogy of its own. And I said all this to be able to basically just emphasize the point that the whole concept of genealogies, or where the people derive from, is tremendously important whenever you approach the study of Islam itself. Okay, again, as I said before, Christians basically accept the genealogy of the Jews up until the birth of Jesus Christ. If you want to look at the basis of the Christian genealogy, that can be found in Luke chapter 3, verse 34 to verse 38. Okay? Luke 3, 34 to 38. When you actually look at Jesus' genealogy, that begins at verse 23. Now, when you look at the actual list of these men who are identified in this genealogy, there are, in Luke chapter 3, there are 21 generations that are actually limited that go from Adam to Abraham. Now, when you look at this, please don't look at this as being a total listing of all the people in the lineage. What the Luke 3 tries to do is to identify specific people that are specific forebearers of the time that the Jews and other Gentiles could be able to recognize as being part of this lineage. When you look at the differences between the Christian chronology and the chronologies for both Jews and Christians, we're going to talk about these in just a few moments when we talk about the Jews and also the Christians. There are a little bit of a few differences that are in here. The Christian chronology, again here in Luke chapter 3, lists Canaan as a son of Arphaxad, while neither Jewish nor Islamic chronology lists him in their generational litany. All right, so that's, again, if you want to go there and look at chapters 34 through 38, the generations that are listed there, and I'll just go ahead and read these off to you. Again, you can be able to find the actual full listing on the website. So beginning with Adam, you have Adam, his son Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noah, Shem, Arphaxad, Canaan, Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, Terah, and then finally Abraham. Now, the Islamic scholar Ibn Ishaq, and we're going to be talking about him actually quite a bit in a few minutes. Ibn Ishaq is probably one of the most predominant or well-known Islamic historians or biographers within all of the Islamic tradition. Ibn Ishaq lists the generations from Adam as being, again, Adam, Sheth or Seth, Yanish, Enos, Canaan, Malil, Mahalalel, Yared or Jared, Aknuk, Enoch, Matushshalach, Methuselah, Lamech, which would be Lamech, Nu or Noah, Sam or Shem, Arphaxad, which would be Arphaxad, Shalik or Shelah, and again, as I said before, he does not list Canaan in his chronological listing, Aber or Eber, Phalik or Peleg, Rau, Saruk, Nahor, Terah, and then Ibrahim, which of course would be Abraham. When you look at the Jewish genealogy, that can be found in the book 1 Devrei Haman, and that's found in chapter 1 through 27. And the Jewish genealogy or chronology again begins with Adam. You have Shet or Seth, Enosh or Enos, Canaan or Canaan, Mahalalel, Yared or Jared, Chanuk or Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, Noach or Noah, Shem, Arphaxad or Arphaxad, Shalach, Shelah, again, Canaan is not listed, Aver or Eber, Peleg or Peleg, Reuel or Ru, Serug, Nachor, Nahor, Terach, and Avraham, or which of course would be Abraham. One of the things that I think is really important, there is a misunderstanding whenever we actually look at the concept of a person being Semitic. When you look at both Arabs as well as Jews or Hebrews, they all come from Noah's son Shem. His other two sons were Ham and Japheth. And so when you look at the people who, for the most part, lived in this area of the Middle East, the Arabian Peninsula, they are all Semitics. So when you talk about a person being anti-Semitic, they're not just anti-Jewish. If you really go back to the root of the word, that goes back to all the sons of Shem. So when you look at anti-Semitic, it goes against all that, like I said, all the offsprings of Shem and not just the Jews. And a little bit later on, I'm going to discuss how these sons of Shem established the pre-Islamic kingdoms of the Arabian Peninsula. I'm going to identify and then describe them, and also try to give you an idea about, according to their genealogies, how they related back to Shem. All right. The next thing that we want to look at is some of the concerns as the Muslims and some of the enmity that is between Islam, or the Arabs, the Muslims, and the Jews, has to go back to the individual known as Ishmael. This is where, and again, when you look at the genealogies, with some exceptions, all three traditions identified the same generations or forebears up until the time of Abraham. So all three religions basically have an agreement on that. The disagreement happens with Abraham and his son. When you look at the Jews and the Christians, if you read in the New Testament, where the Gentiles, Gentile Christians are considered to be the grafted on vine, grafted onto the root of the promise to the Jews. Our tradition is that our blessing comes through Abraham to Isaac, through the Abrahamic covenant. The Muslims or the Islamic believers look at that passing on of the grace, that passing on of the blessing, as happening through Ishmael. This is the first major disagreement that you're going to have between the three religions. And then it is specifically who gets the blessing. Is it Isaac or is it Ishmael? When you look at, we're going to be looking at a lot of verses today, but whenever you look at the relationship between Abraham and Ishmael, a real understanding of this relationship has to go back to the book of Genesis. When you look at Genesis chapter 16, and I'll put this down here. We're going to look at Genesis 16 today, Genesis 21, and if possible, Genesis 25. So if you want to grab your Bible or New Testament, or excuse me, Old Testament, or whatever you have, you can be able to follow along with this. When you look at the Judaic or Christian perspective, they consider Ishmael's mother Hagar to have been a bondwoman, a maidservant to Abraham's wife Sarah, and they from the land of Egypt. And that's described in Genesis chapter 16 and verse 1, where Hagar is specifically identified as being, in the Old Testament, in the Pentateuch, she's specifically identified as being a handmaid, basically a servant or a slave to Sarah. When you look at, we're going to talk about this strictly from a Christian Judaic perspective, then we're going to go back and we're going to look at it again from how the Muslims or the Islamic scholars see it. When you look at Genesis chapter 16, you'll see that part of what has been passed on to our traditions are not accurate. And in that we look at that there being an enmity between Abraham and Ishmael. That is not true. Okay, for the sake of the YouTube audience, I'm going to go ahead and stop this part of the presentation. If you are interested in being able to see or hear the rest of it, I would encourage you again to go back to the Halcyone Publishing website to be able to look at it. Again, if you're interested in understanding other specific or more specific terms or phrases or rituals, I would encourage you to purchase my book, Islam, the Way of Submission, which is available on the Halcyone Publishing website, as well as being available on Kindle. So at this moment, those of you who are just strictly on YouTube, we'll stop here, and then we'll pick up in just a moment. Okay. All right, so as we were discussing just a moment or so ago,